Welcome to the Sterning HR podcast, your ultimate destination for all things HR and professional career development. I'm your host, Bianca Clifton, and I'm thrilled to have you with us. At Sterning HR, we take immense pride in being a specialist HR recruitment and coaching organisation. Our mission is to provide valuable insights and engaging discussions with some of the most impressive HR leaders in the industry. So whether you're a HR professional seeking to enhance your knowledge or someone looking to unlock the full potential of their career, you've come to the right place. In each episode, we dive into the world of human resources. We explore the latest trends, innovative strategies, and game-changing practices that are shaping the workplace of today and tomorrow. Our focus on empowering women is close to our hearts. We believe that every woman deserves to get what she wants and be valued for her true worth. Together, we strive to create an environment where women can thrive, flourish, and confidently pursue their ambitions without having to sacrifice their family life. Thank you for tuning into the Sterning HR podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and stay connected with us for exciting episodes to come.
Hi, Francine and Ben. Thanks for joining me today on this podcast to talk about flexible working.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us, Bianca. It's awesome to be here.
I'm very excited about this episode with this dynamic duo. We might just jump into it. So just firstly, I think with flexible work, there's a lot of ambiguity, or can be a lot of ambiguity around what flexible work means, because flexible work has evolved quite significantly over the last few years. What it can look like now is a lot more fluid and open. And I think as humans, we like structure, and we prefer and feel more comfortable with black and white type of scenarios as opposed to the grey area, which is where flexible work can sit for a lot of organisations. But that can shift into a more structured model, a more comfortable model when organisations unpack and understand what flexible work looks like for their organisation, and specifically what flexible work can look like for each business unit within an organisation. So I'd love to unpack this with you both today. How would you define flexible work in today's rapidly evolving landscape?
I'm really happy to answer this one. This is just such a topical, it's this moment in time where we've gone through a period of, wow, flexibility is a thing, maybe 10 years ago, to when we went through COVID and the period where it was defined as flexibility, but it was actually enforced working from home for a lot of people. And then this uncertainty about how we deal with manufacturing plants or operational plants. So for corporate workers, it was not flexibility, it was enforced working from home or working remotely. And now we've gone into this period of the headlines of, back to work, everybody come back in. And then there's all these things that are missing from this conversation about flexible work. And I think this is the really important bit to say, actually, there's NES standards, so national employment standards, that have been around for a long time that talk about being able to apply for flexible working. And that's evolved into almost an expectation now these days that we expect some level of flexibility. And this is where I think people need to understand that flexibility comes in so many different forms, and we get stuck in hybrid or remote working, and we're not talking about all the other things that it could be. So for different parts of the business, it'll mean different things. And so it could be part-time working, job sharing, it could be starting late, roster changes, split rosters, it could be career break. Some companies offer extra wellness days or extra days annual leave. There's so many ways that we can look at flexibility. And I think what happens is people have been defining recently in terms of headlines around it's remote or it's hybrid or it's all in office. And I think we need to be really careful of getting down to three different things when actually flexibility is exactly what it means. It's pure flexibility in what works for one person or one organization or one team doesn't work for the next.
It can be achievable within that organisation. And I think also organisations need to roll up their sleeves to be able to unpack and see what it looks like for their organisation. as well. All right. So what do you think are some of the benefits of flexible working arrangements for both employees and the organisation? Because it's not one-sided, and I think the more we can talk about this and talk about the successes of flexible working arrangements for both employees and organisations, when we can see it's a win-win, it's kind of a no-brainer. So when you think about, maybe start from an organisational point of view, when you think about, I mean, they kind of, what benefits the employee generally is a knock-on benefit for the employer anyhow, because you're getting more engagement, you're getting greater output. So there's a lot of kind of yin and there's a lot of meshing going on there. But when you think about it from an organisational standpoint, what are some of the benefits for them with being able to implement this type of flexible working culture within their organisations?
Yeah, I might just touch on kind of bringing that up a level just before, and I think Francine can kind of delve into the benefits. I think it's really important to note at this point around what is the strategic intent of the business and what are you trying to achieve? And I think sometimes we kind of jump to solution mode on, we need a solve on flexibility or a policy on flexibility without understanding the why for our business. And I think, as you mentioned before, right, one business might have many needs in this space, depending on business units. They might have manufacturing. So I would really encourage organisations to come back to the why as the starting point for this conversation around what is it that they're trying to achieve, and then the role of flexibility within that. And then I think that can help organisations link then to the benefits, which are numerous, and Francine can maybe touch on a few of those.
I can put
about their why. Are you saying why from a commercial standpoint, like what are they looking to achieve commercially, or do you mean from them looking at their on behalf of their employees?
I think it's both, right? Like, I think from a commercial point of view, what is it that you need to deliver? Are you a high collaboration business that needs a lot of face-to-face time? Are you a business that's looking at cost cutting and offshoring and therefore remote working? So there is definitely a cost element to kind of the employee makeup. Have you got a manufacturing plant and therefore you need shifts and people on the ground? So I think there's a number of factors to look at from the organizational strategy. EVP is another one. Have you got a challenge in attracting talent? Therefore, is there a role that the flexibility needs to play as part of your business strategy? But I would make sure that you always come back to what role is the conversation playing in your broader business strategy before you jump to solution mode.
And I think that's a great, so it can be focused on the business and looking at the business in terms of it being successful, in terms of like I guess business focused, and then it will move over to looking at what you can offer for your employees. And I think one of the good things that you just mentioned there was even with shift work, because we definitely hear this. Well, we've got shift workers here, but you can create more shifts. You can do like you can kind of cut up and you can do it differently to what it has been. So it doesn't need to be rigid. You can introduce more shifts or change the hours around or talk to your employees to see what that would mean like for them. But anyway, I'm kind of getting a bit ahead of ourselves. I'll leave it to you, Francine.
Well, I was just going to say, just taking that business point one step further, I always talk about, I learnt this from a consultant that helped me along the way on my journey sort of 10 years ago, starting on this journey, is it's around the team, the stakeholders, the customers that you have. It's around yourself and the business, but it's also around these days, we think about the environment. And what happened over COVID was why I talk about the sixth point is we say, well, actually, there's this whole thing that happened over COVID that people stopped driving into work, and there was this environmental factor that actually really helped. So just when we think about the business strategy, we need to think about what's right for your customers, your stakeholders, your team, yourself, and the business as well. So it's just really important that people think about that. And then the personal point, then I come back down to what's in it for the business. And I'd love your thoughts on this as well, Bianca, because you would speak to clients and both sides of the fence all the time around this. But from a talent attraction point of view, I can't speak enough about this. And Ben just sort of mentioned that from an EVP point of view. If I want to attract talent, if I want to retain my talent, I need to look at the options that I'm putting forward. And that, again, I come back to that, not the one size fits all. So really understanding what your people are needing, the customer, stakeholder, etc. as well. So be conscious of all those things. And I'd say the ability so if again, you've got to look at it if I don't have a big brand, if my location is perhaps, way out of, away from public transport or hard to get to, I might have to think about these things a little bit more. I have to think about, you mentioned earlier, engagement, so employee engagement and loyalty to the business. It's so high on the top 3 things, and it hasn't moved. People are reading headlines at the moment saying back into the office, and I think we need to dig back into that, and I won't touch on that just right now, but I think the things that people have to appreciate as well is the cost of living at the moment is another factor for people. So if I'm now going to have to go back into an office, or I'm going to have to spend more money, traveling in, if, a lot of the times these decisions are being made by CEOs or leaders that perhaps they have parks in the office. And so it's really, we have to make sure that we're thinking about it from a broader point of view than from, that top level that perhaps has access to a little bit more flexibility in terms of those kind of things. And what they sometimes don't think about, and I mentioned to somebody the other day, how many times are you on a plane? How many times are you traveling as a CEO or a leadership team and you're on your phone, or you're, traveling to an appointment? Those things are that's all flex. And so we have to be able to make sure that even from a leadership position, we're traveling down to the person that's on the production line or in customer service and what they're experiencing as well. So it shouldn't be a different perspective from here to there.
Yeah. I think in terms of some of the benefits as well, with organisations, like, again, for me, it's a no-brainer because we work with so many different businesses and work with so many different individuals and placing them in these businesses. And what I see from what COVID was really good at implementing quite quickly was with the flexible, well, we'll call it flexible work, but remote working it was back then. But I had worked with organisations, like you mentioned too, who might be located geographically in an area that was quite challenging for people to travel to. So I'm thinking about one organisation in particular. They're really in an isolated location. Whenever I would recruit for them, I would see all this talent in the market and I'd be like, they would be perfect for this role. But I just knew I couldn't get them there because it was going into the office. And once COVID happened and they implemented a remote working policy, the people that I could then put in that organisation, the access to the talent that they had was just exponential. And for me as a recruiter, I remember I was like, yes, I was talking to the HR director. I'm like, I'm going to be able to put the people that you need, like I can give you the best skill set now. Whereas before I was always having to I always had to be open with what I was looking at. So I couldn't always get the best skill set for what they needed because I wasn't able to tap into that talent. So I just think when you think about it from an organisational perspective in terms of being flexible, you will have access to so much more talent if you can be flexible in your working arrangements. And I think as well, when we speak to individuals, so employees, and they're enjoying that flexible working environment, so an organisation who's doing it really well, that engagement that they get, that commitment that they give to their role, they're working harder probably than what they were before because they're seeing that this organisation is giving them that trust, but also saying, all right, we'll make this work for you for your life and everything else that you have going on. We're outcomes focused. If you can do this, we will support you and we will trust you to do this. And these people are going above and beyond and they're not leaving that employer. And even with some organisations that don't have the best culture, they will stay for longer and they will be more understanding of that because they're being given that trust to do their job and they're doing their job. We're not talking about individuals whose performance are dropping. They're continuing to perform at a level and a heightened level. So I don't see any downside for when it is done successfully. And when I see it on the flip side for employees, it's now getting to the point where when I speak with individuals in relation to roles, one of the first things pretty much the first thing they'll be asked every time will be around their flexible working policy. So what does it look like? And that's why I was just really surprised to see this pushback from organisations to get people back into the office. I get, and it's not being against that, and it's not about my opinion. It's just what we're seeing on the other end, because I was seeing the benefits that were so strong from an employee perspective as well. The engagement that they had, the output that they had, and the commitment that they had to that organisation as well. So for me, it's a bit of a no-brainer. I don't see long-term how it will work if you do push back to the office, because you think about the ageing workforce and you think about how many years you've got left of them, and then you think about the upcoming workforce that you have. And every person that I talk to in kind of that upcoming demographic, I'm not hearing from anyone that they want to go back into that office full time. And I think we're at
correct.
Yeah, correct. I think that's a fantastic point. Probably one just to worth expanding on a little bit was, we are in a multi-generational workforce, more so than we've ever been before, right? And if you look at, say, potentially the older generation, their perspective on work was, I did a 9 to 5 every day in the office. And in some cases, it was a badge of honour to be the first in the office and the last out of the office. And that's the perspective that they've grown up, and that's almost the ingrained, I guess, belief of what does success look like is I am in the office all of the time, and that's a badge of honour. Where you see now this younger kind of middle Z generation coming through, their expectations are very different, where they're saying, actually, I can be just as productive, if not more productive, by having flexible options available to me. So I think there is kind of this element of this multidimensional generational workforce at play that is impacting some of this conversation as well.
Yeah, and they're not going to do it. They're not going to go into the office 5 days a week.
It's not going to happen.
It's just, and so we're going to get to that point where organisations, they won't have the talent because they will be competing with organisations who are doing this flexible work piece really well and reaping the benefits. But I just hope then with what you're saying, like unfortunately, I do think it is around ingrained behaviour, and it's understandable that that's what's happening because we're human beings and that's how we're wired. But I just hope if that's the case that these kind of senior executives or whoever are making the decisions can see that isn't going to work long term, and there needs to be a shift in the way that a shift in the way of that thinking. And it doesn't mean that people need to be performing, that you employ people who aren't performing in their roles. I think that's the main thing that we want to get across. People are performing in their roles, and if they're not, then look at that flexible work structure that you have in place and then change it. It's not about employing people who aren't performing. It's about a win-win. You can have high performance and you can have really engaged employees as well.
Such an important point, and one I talk about all the time is there's two things that I just wanted to pick up on that you just said. So I read something the other day that actually the boomers are moving, they'll be moving on, and it'll be Gen X's that are sort of leading the organisations, and they'll have experienced something different. So to Ben's perspective, it won't be this, they'll have experienced more of the flexibility. So that'll be an interesting shift when people are saying, oh no, in 10 years time, everyone's going to be 5 days in the office. I don't believe that for a second. And then the second thing is, we go through, and you will know this, Bianca, we go through this recruitment process where we look for the best people for the role. We put them through the process of interviewing them. We trust them. We might put them through 6 interviews or 3 interviews, and then we bring them on board and we onboard them and we trust them and we give them KPIs and objectives and metrics. And we should be managing from the point that we've just gone through a process where we trust this person, we've brought them on, we treat people as adults. And as people, you mentioned it earlier, we all need a level of control over our lives. So we don't like being told what to do. We don't like being told to come into the office 5 days a week and work from 9 till 7 or whatever it might be. So people fundamentally, Maslow's hierarchy of needs will tell you that above food and water, we need to have some control over our lives. So it's very important that people feel like they've got some kind of ability, to flex in here. So I've come into this organisation, I need to feel trusted, and you need to show me that through the leadership and the management of my KPIs as well.
I think that can play out on the flip side as well, around the need for control. So we're facing some pretty tough economic times out there. And I think leadership is looking for control. And I think one of the ways they look for that is to go, well, I want everyone in and around me so that I've got contact and control over what's going on. And if I don't have clear KPIs and performance management processes in place, the way that I feel that control is by having proximity to people. So I think it plays out kind of on both levels as well.
And that's actually a really good point to bring up, Ben, because definitely if you see the kind of backflip that it's been the last kind of 12 to 18 months prior to this, the economy was booming. It was a candidate short market. There was a bidding war out there. Salaries were being inflated significantly to obtain talent, and now it's just done a flip. So you're right, it is about, and it's not about not understanding the seriousness of that, but you can have all that structure in place and still be focused on that performance and still give that flex piece. But I think because that flex piece has been really been given a big push because of COVID, just a lot of organisations still probably trying to get their head around what that could look like. And then you have to get the business involved, don't you? You need to get your managers involved to then be able to understand, all right, well, what does that look like for your area of the business? What works, what doesn't work?
That's right.
And I guess a lot of the majority of us haven't had the time to do that properly yet. So
Bianca, what I'm seeing on that, so the businesses that we're talking to and what you'll be seeing, I'm sure, is you've got these people. I'll come back to the headline piece. So we're reading a lot of the headlines. NAB are back at work, CBA back into the office. Zoom, I think, was one of them, back into the office. And so people read the headlines and they don't read below that. So they're talking to their colleagues and sort of saying, well, everyone's going back, so we should be going back because we're productive. And when you read below the headlines, all these companies have gone from completely remote, and now they're just introducing flexible working where, they might want you to come in on a couple of days. It might be choiceful days. They're all different. And then you've got places like Atlassian or Canva that are just still in the world of, back to your point, we will get this scope of talent that we will not have gotten if we stick to our, really flexible work from anywhere sort of policies or philosophies. And I think that what HR, it's often on the HR representatives that are dealing with the CEOs or the executive teams that are saying, but hang on, everyone's doing this, so we should do this. And so it's understanding then what to do with that. How do I now go in and start to explain, or how do I explain with data, or how do I explain with case studies or examples? And sometimes that's really hard because you feel like you're dealing with people that have got these different perspectives that are just, they've got their offices, they've got their cars, they're going, no, to Ben's point, everybody's more productive when they're around me, and I can see that. But I think on that productivity point, I would just say we've got to be careful of that idea that you're more productive in the office, because we might have people that are driving, or on a train for an hour and a half to come into the office, losing those 3 hours in a day. They're not going to keep doing that if we start going, well, everyone's back. And so there's options that even when I think about manufacturing or operations, I still think, what are those parts of those roles that you can be creative with to say, are there administrative parts of those roles that could be done differently? You know, are there ways that you can job share between a corporate role and a manufacturing role? And so being able to be creative, and whether, you know, for HR people, they need to get the case studies, the data, use a consultant, you know, don't ever worry about getting some advice on these things, but because there's lots of creative ways that you can have a conversation that opens up with a leadership team. And I just, one more thing I'd say on that is, all leaders are different, so they hear things differently. So how I speak to one leader will be different to how I speak to the next. And I was having a conversation with somebody about this earlier in the week, is you've got a really data-driven CEO, you know, he's going to want to see data. And another CEO is going to be able to, you know, talk to you about the fact that they've got a family and they need flexibility. So it'll be a different conversation. So it's really understanding the people that you're talking to and what their needs are, and back to that why as well, and how you have that conversation, rather than going in blanketly with just banging the drum.
Yeah, and I think you're right with that data piece. Sorry, Ben, with that data piece, it is worthwhile. Don't feel like you need to do it all on your own, like in terms of HR, because they would be getting that, depending on the culture of the organisation and where your leaders are at, they would be feeling that push of, all right, you need to make this happen, you need to bring our people back. And long term, like we've already kind of touched on, it's just not going to work. It might, and you might be thinking, oh, well, if it works for the next few years, I don't know, maybe you might be able to get away with it for the next few years, but you're not going to be getting that best talent. So it's going to come at a cost. And when you talk about organisations, Canberra and Atlassian and et cetera, who are like, there's a reason why they're continuing to offer this and offer it really well, because they're getting the results. So they wouldn't be doing it if that wasn't happening. So, and you're right with people about reading the headlines, when you actually kind of look at it, and that's just the media doing their job. They're sensationalizing it because they want people to pick up the papers or what have you. But as a HR leader, you can use external specialists to help you put together a business case and compile that data. So then you can go in there and have those conversations with your executive leaders and get them bought in.
It's really interesting, the data piece, right? I think data can be weaponized to tell any story that you would like. And I think it's fascinating reading data on this. I don't think we've had enough time elapse just get a clear line of sight on data. So I was reading some data that said that through face-to-face collaboration, innovation is boosted by 11%, this study found. So you could read that and go, well, actually, we need people in collaborating face-to-face, and we're going to force that through a hybrid working policy. I read a different study that says diversity of thought increases innovation by 77%. So then you start to say, well, hang on, what's better here? Am I better to have a flexible working policy that attracts diverse talent, or am I better to have people in the office forced? So data can be used to tell whatever story you want to tell through that data. And I think we need to be careful about that. What I would say is, I think the best source of data is your employees. Asking your organisation what they want and what they value, I think, is the most important and clearest data set that an organisation can have as we kind of move through this space of getting clear on kind of what some concrete data and evidence supports on what the best way forward is.
And I think just with that, I was thinking of an example. I was speaking with a HRD who we work quite closely with the other day. So this individual, they were advocating, they like going back in and working in the office part-time for a certain amount of days. And obviously it's not about our opinion here. It's about, everyone has their own opinion, and it's about finding out what works for them to then have that win-win there. So I was having this conversation. This is just to show a different example. So they enjoyed going back into the office and having that home split because they want want to go. They feel like they're getting that engagement when they're going back into the office. They're an Australian-based business, but they've also acquired a US-based business. And this US business has been working remotely for 12 years now, which just kind of blew my mind. It showed them a bit sheltered, but I was like, wow, that's interesting. I'm like, how does that work? So we're talking about merging those cultures and the challenges that they had also, because it's all US based, but those individuals also need to have interactions and time with the Australian business as well. And what they were doing there, I just found it really interesting and they were doing a really good job of it when we were talking about what flexible work can look like depending on your business and your business units and the complexity with that. So what they were organized, so they had gotten rid of their head office, they had put different kind of like floating offices where their employees had access to, and then they would do, I think it was quarterly kind of meetups that they were doing globally as well. And then they were doing kind of weekend retreats, not every weekend, but kind of quarterly as well. And I just found that it doesn't have to be you work from home and that's it, or you've got a shorter working week in terms of hours. It was understanding how the individuals like to work or were successful in terms of their output, but also like to work, and then how they did that from a global perspective as well. And they were making it work, and the business was doing really well because of it. Now, it wasn't something that she was able to put in place overnight, but what she had was a really engaged ELT who already in the US had seen the benefits of remote working, and then a curious enough ELT sitting locally to go, okay, we saw the benefits that happened during COVID. We've got two different cultures here as well in terms of what they want. Why don't we go in and understand how this can work, what our people want, and then what they ended up settling on might look a bit messy, but it worked exactly for them. So that was a really good piece that I found. Yeah, it worked really well.
It's a perfect example of creativity. That's the exact thing that I was talking about.
It's creativity, isn't it?
It's just working out what your business needs and how it can work. And it's not always going to work perfectly for everybody. And I think the point that you made there was, we've all worked in this room for global organizations, and sometimes you're having calls at 6 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock at night. And so if I can't then take an hour off in the day to go for a run or do what I need, then is that fair? Does that work? And so I think what you're saying is it's about picking and choosing what works for your organization and being able to really think outside that square and be able to work out, that's a global organization, therefore we need to do X, Y, Z. And same with what we were talking about with if I'm in manufacturing or operations, what does that mean?
Yeah.
I think it comes back to that point.
The other thing I would add though, right, is I love the creativity of it, but equally I love the clarity. And I think that's equally as important, right? We've defined it. And rightly or wrongly, that is what we've defined and we're standing behind as our culture and how we are going to operate. And employees have clarity on expectation. I think that's the other really important thing of, a lot of this is really murky around this undertone of we want you back in the office, but without the clarity. So I love the creativity, but plus the clarity is the success factor for me in that conversation.
Yeah, and they're obviously getting as well the output. So it's not one has to be sacrificed because of the other. They're getting engaged employees who love that they're able to do their work and have their life and perform at the level where they feel like they're being successful. Because let's not forget, people want to perform. There's nothing more like negatively impacting than being in a job and not being able to perform. So just innately as humans, we want to perform. And like you said, it is clear. So for them, it might be a little bit, the structure might be a little bit, not messy, but it's set. They've got a few things going on, but it's clear in terms of what that looks like. So what would you recommend if you were talking to a head of HR who was wanting some I guess, some support, or is kind of wanting to go and have that conversation with their with the ELT or whoever it may be, what would you say is best practice in terms of implementing the, I guess, flexible work successfully? So thinking about it, I guess, from a stakeholder perspective, and then also in terms of if you could kind of articulate I know it's not as easy as just kind of rattling off some steps, but if you could make it that easy, what would you recommend?
I think for me, and I'll kind of maybe just start on a bigger point here, and then Francine's obviously she'll elaborate. But the first thing is understanding the perspective of the ELT. Where are they at on this journey? I think is the most important thing. Know your stakeholders, know their opinions, know their feelings and beliefs towards, the situation. And I think it's from there that gives you the ability to start to establish mutual ground through different strategies. So as a starting point, I think if you're not clear on how they feel and their attitudes and beliefs towards this space, that would be my clear starting point, is to have those conversations and get that understanding.
I think I will dovetail completely into that to say that's that bit around, now I understand where my starting point is. I have my employee data as well, hopefully from, engagement surveys, focus groups, whatever you've done to gather employee understanding and what their needs are, balanced with, really deeply understanding your EVP. That's going to be really important. Then the next step that I would take is understanding their thoughts and perspectives. Now, what am I going in with? And it comes back to that point that I made earlier around, if your exec are thinking that this is a productivity and a control and perhaps business is not where it needs to be, I need to see people, then you're going in with a perspective of understanding that clearly, and then being able to say, okay, help me understand the productivity a little bit better. So what do you think you're going to see by having people in the office? So how do you counter that with things like the travel time? How do you counter that with things like productivity and efficiency measures? So if the feeling is that you're not as productive as possible, what's the technology that can make it productive when we're working from home or remotely? Now I've got metrics, I've got clear metrics, I've gone through the great interview processes, I've got a clear understanding of the people in my organisation and the leadership in the organisation. I'm going to want to put a philosophy or a policy in place around flexibility. That's really important, that I've got an anchor as well. And I like to call it a philosophy because I think policy makes it a really hard word. I like to think about it as a philosophy because that's what we stand by. And then if you're struggling to talk to them at a data point of view or a case study point of view, or what your employees have said, and come to an understanding of what's going to work for our stakeholders, our customers, etc., I think bring in somebody externally, because that's okay too, and bring in an expert that can then come in. And sometimes that's all it takes to just be able to bat off a few of those questions, or they feel like they're getting somebody with expertise that perhaps you as an internal person doesn't have. This is the journey that I've been through for the last 10 years, and I've followed that same journey. And some execs are harder than others. It just is what it is, and you may not end up exactly where everybody wants to be, but I think it's taking all the things that we've spoken about into account, and then being able to build the philosophies, the guidebooks for employees. How do you have this conversation with your leader or your colleagues about what you would like to put in place? It's building guidebooks for leaders to know how to understand how to have that conversation back. And some companies are just going to be like, you know what, you manage it yourself. So it will be different, but I think the world that we're in right now feels like we need a little bit of giving back a sense to the executive teams that they've got that control to some extent. And I think that's why it's important to have the really good data, guides, philosophies, etc., in your back pocket, so that, back to Ben's point, people understand and it's clear.
It's also about getting to the root cause of why. What are you actually trying to achieve through this, right? Flexible working and these policies is a solution, but what is it a solution to? And I think sometimes we just have these superficial conversations. And I think, to Francine's point, you've got to get past level 1 and 2 questions into level 3 around a deep understanding of what is the objective that you're trying to achieve, and then what is the role of flexibility as a solution in helping you achieve that outcome.
Yeah.
And just one further thing I'd say on that, sorry, is just that I have worked with organisations that have said, but it's not, it's not this remote, this hybrid thing that we've got. It's when people aren't collaborating properly. Now, when you dig deeper, are you turning your cameras on? Are you using collaboration tools properly? Like you've got so many collaboration tools these days. Are you still stuck in, back in pre-COVID, back in the 1990s? Are you using the technology? And I'd go further than that to say, are you training people on the technology? These are the simple steps that say, if I feel well in my job, I feel productive. And to your point, everyone wants to feel like they're doing a good job. You have to train me on the tools. You have to give me the tools. I need to feel productive because you've given me the tools. I need to collaborate and see people's faces. I'm not saying every meeting needs to be on, but maybe you've got too many meetings, and maybe you can reduce that and get more productive, more efficient by having all those things in place. Because I think just going, hybrid working is not working, but we're not investing in these other pieces to make it work is a real issue for some organisations.
Yeah, they're not doing it right.
It's so fascinating. I had a conversation with the CEO the other day, and he said, I'm just so frustrated that I can't walk over to someone's desk and have a conversation. And I kind of just went, if that was me, I would just pick up Teams and dial them on a video conference. And I probably got more access quicker to that person at my fingertips. So again, it comes back to that perspective. But, technology literacy, I think, is a key enabler for organizations to enable connection through collaboration of digital tools and save us from conversations like, I can't walk over to someone's desk and have a conversation with them, and now I'm frustrated as a result. That's why we need everyone back in the office.
Yeah, because that comes at the cost of so much. Like, that's just crazy. It comes at the cost of so much more. And that, unfortunately, what you're saying, and this is why it can be a bit disheartening, that's behavioural.
It is. But the other thing it links to, right, is actually it could be detrimental to employees' careers.
Of course.
And if our leaders are saying, I want to collaborate with people face to face, those that are in proximity are going to be biased to those leaders. And you're going to create, by not being in the office, you're going to be disadvantaged by proximity bias to access those leaders. So those that are fronting up every day, 5 days a week, because that's what the CEO wants, they might not be the best people, performance-wise, but they may be the ones getting promoted through proximity bias because, they're there being seen, being heard. So I think that's a real watch out that we need from a bias point of view to be aware of.
That's a totally different, I mean, we could talk about that and go off, and that's a totally different conversation obviously relative. It's a bit scary thinking of it like that, because again, it's not outcomes or outputs focused, is it? But I think kind of what you were saying in terms of going through kind of steps, again, Francine, you articulate it really well. So I guess, and Ben as well, understanding, I think, firstly, in terms of where your ELT is at, and you have to ask those challenging questions, like you said, not the first and second level questions. It's digging down deep to actually understand, is it behavioural, or is there something valid? Like, are we seeing actually that this is is this detrimental to our organisation? And from just what we've spoken about, and also just seeing how organisations work, and what I hear from organisations and employees is, I think if you are finding that actually, no, there's reasons why we're not doing this, once you unpack those reasons, you will see that it's probably because you don't have the right systems in place, or you don't have the right behaviours in place, or not even behaviours, capability from managers to manage this well. And I think another key area of this that we won't have time to touch on really now, we could go into a lot of detail, is it's also a lot about the capability of managers, and it's a different, it is a different skill set to have, and it is something that organisations should be looking at investing in those managers to learn how to manage their teams in
right.
this type of environment. Obviously, you've got the technology there to help, but it's a different skill set to have. Just checking in with people, building that connection as well.
Totally. Having the right KPIs, checking in on a regular basis, having those development conversations, none of that stops. But if you think that because you're not face-to-face and therefore you can't do that, then of course what was happening even over COVID, there was this trust issue. I haven't heard from my leader in 2 weeks or a week or whatever. So what's going on? And there was this definite issue with trust. So if people can keep doing really clear KPIs, really clear check-ins, cameras on where you can because you're connecting with people, there's just behavioural ways that we need to lift. This is the new leadership. This is not around, this is not something new. This is new leadership over the last few years. And now if I don't act with empathy, if I don't trust my people, I don't understand data, I can't collaborate with technology, then you're kind of losing the edge that you should have on your own leadership. So I actually think you're spot on. I think it's the capability of the leaders to be able to really engage their people with this. And I know for a fact you will get those teams that are going to stick with you, are going to be loyal, are going to love working for you, because guess what? They can, go for a run at lunchtime and they know that they're doing a great job and they don't care.
They can live their life, and work as well. Like when you think about the generations beforehand as well, just quick, like I always think about the cost of living, and I think about with my mum. So she didn't work. My dad worked because she could stay at home and afford to look after. We could afford for her to look after us, and we had a house, and the cost of living, and so when you think about that again, when we talk about Gen X and the baby boomers and everything. Moving in this type of direction, property prices aren't just the cost of living isn't going to drastically reduce. It's just going to keep going up. So you do need in families as well, generally 2 people working, and people have families as well and lives, or caring for someone or looking after someone, or there's a lot of other things going on.
And just on that, interestingly, just in the last couple of years, Qualtrics came out with a study that said people feel like their work-life balance has decreased over the last couple of years, not increased. So actually what they're saying is that, people might feel like they've got to come in, and what's happening now is we're getting quiet quitting. So I'm coming in because I have to be here. So my work-life balance feels like it's going down, but I'm sitting in an office just, on
not performing.
Facebook, not performing. So I think that we've got a real issue of that happening in the present season.
And at the risk of a bit of a tangent alert here, but I think, this links to inclusive leadership, right? And I think if you're an inclusive leader and at the heart of it, you're really connected with your team and their needs. And you know what? If I've got a team that's working fully flexibly, my role as an inclusive leader is, if I want my team to collaborate, I'm going to give them plenty of forward notice so that they can plan their family lives to be in the office, as an example. Or is everyone being heard if we've got a mixed meeting, some in the room, some on Zoom? As a leader, am I making sure that people that are participating virtually have got a chance to participate? Because I think we've all sat there in a mixed room going, I can't get a word in because I'm online. But that's the role of the leader, to make sure everyone's voice is heard, whether you're virtual or whether you're physically in the room. So leadership is a key unlock in this space. 100%.
Yeah, and like you said, it's about investing in them. Like, not that it's investing in this new. It is a new skill set. So I think if kind of organisations are looking at that and investing in it, it's going to obviously it's going to continue to evolve in this space as well. But yeah, I think there's some organisations. I think there's some organisations who are doing it really, really well, and they're seeing the benefits from it. So if organisations are kind of starting out and wondering kind of how to do this, they can look at those organisations who are doing it really well. But also, Francine and Ben, do you want to let people know how they can reach out to you as well? Because I know that you guys do a lot of work and are subject matter experts in this space. So say if I was the head of HR and looking to start having this type of conversation, but like you said, because I think having someone externally as well come in and do this work in an organisation is can be really advantageous because it's not based on anyone's opinion or preference. You're doing it from an external perspective, and you're coming in there with data, and also you're working with organisations and have a proven track record in providing this service to organisations, and they're getting these great outcomes, whether it's an engaged, better engaged workforce, whether it's opening up their talent pool to accessing talent that they haven't previously been able to have, whether it's in terms of actual driving output from a commercial point of view as well. So how would they get in touch with you?
Yeah, they can just reach out to us on LinkedIn. We People Considered Together. If you want to get us in touch via LinkedIn, very happy to chat. I think the first starting point to any of this is a simple conversation to understand your needs, what you're looking for, and from there we can help you find the right pathway forward and the right fit. So feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn.
Perfect. All right. Well, it's lovely having you both on. Dynamic duo. We could talk about this all day, but
all day.
Yeah.
Love talking about it.
Well, there's so much value to be had from it, isn't it? But I appreciate you guys. Yep.
I do feel like we just touched the surface, and we really could talk about it all day, but really appreciate you having us on, and being able to support people is what we do. So even if we can support one person to have a better experience, that's kind of my purpose, is to make sure that we make organizations feel like they're more compassionate, and that they can see the value in the output for their success and performance as well. So it's the nice balance of both for us. So thanks for having us.
We're all human, aren't we? We all want to be valued, but we also all want to, like I said, we also want to perform as well. So
yeah, exactly. Thanks.
All right, well, we'll have to have you on again.
Love to.
All
Thanks,
right.
Bianca. All right,
Bye.
take care. Bye.